Attention please. This upload is only for educational purpose. No intention to infringe copyrights. Learning English with subtitles. GPITRAL. GPITRAL. Definitely a must-see. Follow us.
Mary Bastholm was almost certainly one of Fred West's victims, but tragically for her family, police were never able to prove it.
In 1994, every time a body was found and linked to the Fred West case, we always maybe hoped that it would have been Mary, but it never obviously was.
In 1968, Mary was 15. She had recently been a bridesmaid at her brother's wedding. She was working as a waitress at a cafe near Gloucester city centre, a cafe Fred used when he worked close by. Mary vanished after going to catch a bus to see her boyfriend. There were no witnesses and at that time nothing to connect her to Fred. But in 1994, in the Cromwell Street investigation, detectives did discover evidence that might link Mary with Fred.
My wife and I did go down to the police station and view a lot of articles that had been taken from the West's house. And my wife picked out a small silver locket on a chain. And she said that that was Mary's, because she wore it as a bridesmaid to our wedding. Now, we had a photograph of this, and the police took the photograph away, not just of the locket, but of her wearing the locket. They took the photograph away for forensic, and it came back that because it was black and white, they couldn't tell whether it was gold or silver.
Police really firmly believe that he probably had killed Mary, but he just wouldn't talk about it. And that's a very interesting situation, isn't it? Because why wouldn't he talk about it? And one wonders, if he did kill her, well, you know, where is she? And wherever she is, perhaps there are others with her, as it were.
If Mary Bastholm was another of Fred West's victims, was she buried in Fingerpost Field? At the time Mary vanished, it was already hiding the remains of one of his early victims, but there were many other potential burial sites. A news report after the trial raised the possibility of another location in the Gloucestershire countryside.
It's believed that on the day that police started digging up the garden at 25 Cromwell Street, Fred West spent several hours here. It's also understood that he told his son Stephen during a prison visit that he came here to tie up several loose ends.
Throughout the initial investigation, we were receiving information about, Fred had built me a patio is there someone buried under there and so on. And Fred was a builder, so there was a lot of opportunity for potentially disposing of bodies. You know, if you dig a big trench and fill it full of concrete, you don't know what's at the bottom of it.
Soon after Mary's disappearance, Fred met Rose, a teenager living in the village of Bishop's Cleeve.
Rose's background is mind-bogglingly dysfunctional. Dad was a schizophrenic. Mother had mental health issues and was having electric convulsive therapy when she was pregnant with Rose. There's incest in the family. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on.
She explained how her father, Bill Letts, had abused her and then had been invited by Fred around to Midland Road and Cromwell Street, where he shared Rose with Fred.
As Steve used to say, that their son, you know, it's as if two wrong people got together and that formed an explosive mixture.
The couple moved to Midland Road in Gloucester. It was here that Rose killed for the first time. While Fred was in prison for theft, 17-year-old Rose was left to look after Rena's 2 children and her own baby. When Fred came home, 8-year-old Charmaine was dead. Her body was found at Midland Road in 1994. Astonishingly, no one in authority ever checked where Charmaine had gone.
There was no apparatus in place at the time to actually check that a child who left one school showed up at another school, whereas Charmaine disappeared because she'd been murdered. Now that seemed extraordinary to me.
When Rena turned up asking about Charmaine, Fred killed her too, and buried her in fields close to Anne McFall. 23 years later, he led police to the exact spot.
Well, it was a very surreal experience, as one of the most beautiful places you could wish to be on a spring morning at about 6 a.m. As the church bells are ringing in the mist and the daffodils are just out and so on. And there we are, hammering a stave into a ground to mark the spot of his first wife, and I have to say he was deadly accurate as to where she was.
It was at this point that Rose tried to return home to Bishop's Cleeve. Fred came to take her back. As he led her away, she told her parents, "You don't know what he's capable of, even murder."
I think she changed through her life. I mean, when she met Fred, she was young and manipulative and malleable, but she became this very aggressive, shrewish woman. I mean, don't forget, she was a prostitute. She was a hooker. She was a pretty rough prostitute, married to a violent man, bringing up a big family with not much money. I mean, it was all pretty tough.
The West's family life now settled into a nightmarish, dysfunctional routine, as recalled by witnesses at the time of the trial.
There was a doorbell, like, for the flats, and then there was her doorbell, out the front. And, like, if her doorbell rang, it was a bloke. And then he'd go in, and then he'd go straight up the stairs, and then he'd knock on her door, and then he'd go in her room.
And what did you make of that at the time?
Well, I thought it was a bit weird at first, and then, and then you used to hear like noises like in her room, and then I knew then.
What did you know? I mean,
well,
sorry, it's not obvious.
She must have been on the game.
Rose worked as a prostitute from home, first at Midland Road, later at Cromwell Street.
What was Fred's attitude to that? Because he presumably knew.
Oh yeah, well, he must have known. Because he used to argue over money. He used to tell her that she wasn't charging them enough, and he wanted her to charge him more,
Fred and Rose started to take in lodgers to pay the bills. Many of them were vulnerable teenage runaway girls who felt safe moving in with a married couple.
Frederick West, I mean, he was very kind to me, and I'm not going to say he wasn't, because he was. Rose, I felt really uneasy with her at times for certain reasons.
What was it about Rose that made you feel uneasy?
Well, she was about 19 at the time, and she always portrayed she wanted a friend. And I mean, I was looking for friends because I didn't know anybody, and I felt lonely. And at first I thought that's what it was, friendship. But in the weeks that came, she used to, I don't know, she used to sort of like touch my shoulders, or she would play with my hair and make suggestive remarks to me, like I was pretty, or, could she spend time with me, coffee, or would I go to town with her? And she was always touching me.
It rapidly became clear to Barbara Jones that this was no conventional family home.
She had certain objects which were really, to me, they looked a bit outdated, because, she had things with chains on, and it had spiky bits on in handles, and I didn't know what they were. Then she had like a lot of black stuff there. It was loads and loads of black stuff, like leather stuff, in a sense it looked like torture equipment to me, as if like, you know, you would get somebody, either chain them down or tie them up and you'd hit them. That's what it looked like to me.
There were already warning signs about the behaviour of the West children that Barbara was caring for.
Little Heather, she was shy and she was quite nervous, and you could never really get her to open up. And like if you wanted to cuddle her or hold her, you really had to like get her to come to you, because sometimes she'd back off. And I just think, why is she backing off? Because she knows me and she knows I'm not going to hurt her.
For more than 20 years, the facade they had built up protected the Wests from official scrutiny, though there may have been some awareness of Rose's activities.
There was the unfortunate issue of Cromwell Street being something of a knocking shop with Rose as the madame, and certainly there were more than one police officer who were a little bit anxious lest it should come to public knowledge that they had visited.
Police saw him as contained as this petty thief who would tell on people taking drugs to Cromwell Street. And of course, police are interested in that and don't realise that, you know, there's some really dreadful stuff going on.
You're not the lonely guy at the end in a little flat. You know, you're Mr. and Mrs. West. You appear to be conventional, and of course they were far from that. They were, you know, hugely deviant, sadistic, violent people.
2 decades of murder were to follow at Cromwell Street. Very few lived to tell their tale.
When I came round, he'd already tied my hands behind my back with my scarf and was putting like brown parcel tape around my mouth, but it all the way around my head, like, and over my hair as well, to keep me quiet.